This lesson is solve and graph linear inequality. The goal is to solve and graph a linear inequality. What you should understand by the end of this lesson is that just like the properties of equality to solve equations, you can use the properties of inequalities to solve inequalities. Alright, we are still using the same symbols and words and graphs for these linear equalities that we used in the last lesson. This time though, you are going to have both an x and a y, or two variables, and you're going to solve it exactly like you did when you solved an equation. The only difference is when you get to step 5, and that is when you divide by a negative number. Actually, if you divide or multiply by a negative number, that means if there is a negative number sitting in front of the letter or the variable, you have to flip the symbol of inequality when you finish. So I should be showing you this when we do an example. Alright, here's the first example. We're going to solve the inequality and graph the solution. Now, if you notice, I have this 3 underneath the division line, and everything else is up on top. So I have to multiply both sides by 3 before I can do anything else. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3, which is going to leave me t plus 1 is greater than or equal to negative 3, because negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. Then I'm going to just solve it like I would any other equation. I subtract 1 from both sides, and that gives me t is greater than or equal to negative 4, because I'm adding these two together. So now I'm going to have to graph it. The arrow is pointing to the right. It is underlined, so it's a filled-in circle, and it's greater than or equal to negative 4. So I have my circle, and my arrow is going that way. So t is greater than or equal to negative 4. Here's your practice 1. Solve the inequality and graph the solution. And I'll give you a hint. Divide both sides by the number sitting outside the parentheses before you continue on. Practice 2. Solve the inequality and graph the solution. I'll give you another hint, especially if some of you might have problems seeing this. If you like the letter or the variable on the left-hand side, rewrite it so the variable is on the left-hand side. In this case, just make sure that when you rewrite it, that the pointed end is still pointed towards the G. Alright, here I have, so solve for Q and graph the solution. I have two inequalities and then an or between them. That means our answer is going to have two arrows pointing outward. So I'm going to solve them like two separate inequalities. Negative 2q plus 5 is greater than or equal to 11. And q minus 18 is greater than negative 15. So I'm going to subtract 5 on this one. I end up with negative 2q is greater than or equal to 11 minus 5 is 6. And here we go. I'm going to divide by negative 2. So when I divide that, I get q. I flip the symbol of inequality, is less than or equal to negative 3. So there's one answer. I'm going to add 18 on this one. So I get q is greater than 3. I don't need to flip the symbol of inequality. And now I'm going to graph it up on the line. Q is less than or equal to -3, so it's filled in. And Q is greater than 3, so it's an open circle with the arrow out this way. Here's practice 3. Solve for P and graph the solution. Practice 4. Solve for Q and graph the solution. This question is asking us to solve for G and graph the solution. If you'll notice, it is an AND inequality. There are my two symbols of inequality, which means it's going to look like a barbell. This end is left end is going to be, or this end is going to be filled in circle. This one is going to be an open circle. All right, so I have rewritten the problem down here. And the first thing I'm going to do is add the 6G to the middle. So I have -18. 1G plus 6G is 7G minus 11. I'm going to add 11 to both sides. I end up with -7, 7G, and 14. When I divide all the numbers by 7, I end up with -1 is less than or equal to G, which is less than 2. So again, I'm going to have my barbell. And in all reality, you could read this as G is greater than or equal to -1, but less than 2. And they are connected. So there is the graph of that solution. Here's practice 5. Solve for D and graph the solution. And practice 6. Solve for U and graph the solution. After you've done this lesson, be sure to rate yourself where you are on the scale of understanding on your goal sheet. Are you beginning? Are you learning? Are you understanding? Or are you an expert? Be sure to have me check your 6 practice problems before you do your IXL lesson. And that's the end of this lesson. Good luck. Remember, you need to get a 90 or better on IXL.